we began to climb.
Near or far, we have reached across Samar.
From Catbalogan, Mercedes, Paranas and Pasay. From our halls, we walk their aisles.
Achievements and awards now in prize. Join us and we'll show you the greatness of SSU. Samar State University, soaring high with excellence. Seat of innovation, we'll build and serve the nation. Samar State University, it's the best for you and me. Your future and dreams come alive. So come on to Samar State University.
Samar State University.
So come on to Samar State University. From our humble beginnings, we began to shine.
From taking little footsteps, we began to climb.
Near or far, we have reached across Samar.
From Catbalogan, Mercedes, Paranas and Pasay. From our halls, we walk their aisles.
Achievements and awards now in prize. Join us and we'll show you the greatness of SSU. Samar State University, soaring high with excellence. Seat of innovation, we'll build and serve the nation. Samar State University, it's the best for you and me. Your future and dreams come alive. So come on to Samar State University.
Samar State University.
So come on to Samar State University. From our humble beginnings, we began to shine.
From taking little footsteps, we began to climb.
Near or far, we have reached across Samar.
From Catbalogan, Mercedes, Paranas and Pasay. From our halls, we walk their aisles.
Achievements and awards now in prize. Join us and we'll show you the greatness of SSU. Samar State.
weary,
When troubles come and my heart burden be,
and I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas.
I am strong
When I am on your shoulders, you raise me up to more than I can be. There is no life without its hunger.
Each restless heart beats softly, perfectly.
But when you come and I am filled with wonder, sometimes I think I glimpse eternity. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas.
I am strong
When I am on your shoulders, you raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas.
I am strong
When I am on your shoulders, you raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Sa silanganan, alam ng
We humans are resilient. We can learn to thrive in our new normal if we have the mindset and the resources we need to adapt. There is purpose in absolutely everything we are facing right now. So before anything else, let us first acknowledge and greet the pillars of SSU a very sunny and pleasant morning. So to start with, let's have a good morning, Dr. Ronald Orale, the VP for Research and Extension Services, Dr. Lydia Gonzalez, the VP for Administration, Dr. Felisa Gumba, the VP for Academic Affairs, Engineer Maria Lourdes, the VP for Student Affairs and Services, and of course, our pretty and beautiful Director of the Student Welfare and Development Services, Ms. May Neva Canyal. And last but not the least, the mother and the heart of SSU, the ever-supportive University President, Dr. Marilyn Cardoso. So beautiful ladies and men, good morning, SSU, and of course, good morning, Balogan, because we are not only inviting SSU personnel and students, but also students and personnel from other schools in Balogan. So before we proceed with the rationale and the introduction of the speaker, let's first read the house rules for today's webinar. Okay. So this is going to be an amazing symposium as always, as long as everyone follows the few simple rules. Rule number 1, please turn on camera and microphone if not needed. Rule number 2, for Zoom participants, please rename using the following format: your school _ first name or your agency _ first name. Rule number 3, for FB Live participants, you may share, tag, mention SSU students to join this FB live stream, but please refrain from posting unnecessary comments in the comment section. Number 4, for Zoom participants, questions and clarifications will be entertained after the talk. By then, you may turn on your cam and mic you may use the chat box. The moderators will queue if you are already recognized. Rule number 4, for FB participants, you may key in your questions and clarifications in the comment section, but will be entertained after the talk. Rule number 5, please stay until the end of the symposium. Rule number 6, make sure to fill out the attendance and evaluation for your certificate of participation. So attendance and evaluation link will be open until December 2020 on behalf of those who will not be able to join the live stream of this symposium. Okay, so in the interconnected world, the pandemic has not only affected lives, but also had a strong impact on various sectors. The education sector is among the most impacted service sectors from the pandemic. Shifting from classroom to various alternative learning platforms created tremendous changes for both teachers and students. These changes may bring stress and anxiety to those who are directly affected, including students at home. However, we should not always look into the situation as something negative. In fact, the new normal gave us an opportunity to invite and listen to brilliant speakers as they share their expertise in terms of guiding us get through the current situation. And today, the Student Welfare and Development Services, through its Career and Placement Services and PESO, will be having a webinar on how to manage academic requirements during pandemic. So this will guide and help students cope with the academic anxiety and other related factors to lessen the burden brought about by the COVID-19. Without any further ado, to introduce our resource speaker for today, we have the Director of the Student Welfare and Development Services, Dr. May Villanueva Canyal.
Good morning, our students from Samar State University and from other schools in Bulacan. So as we have our webinar to manage academic requirement during graduate, a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Bukidnon State University, and finished her Master's of Health and Social Science in De La Salle University. She also finished her Doctor of Philosophy in Psychology major in Clinical Psychology at Ateneo de Davao University. She is a registered psychometrician, a licensed professional teacher, and a certified life coach from the Life Coach Training Institute. At current, she is the Assistant Professor 3 and the Head of Admission and Testing Division in CAS Guidance Designate at Bukidnon State University. So ladies and gentlemen, our dear student, let us welcome our speaker for this morning, Dr. Xyle Fe A. Nakamute ka, Xyle.
Hi, sorry, apology. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Am I clear? Am I loud and clear, Ma'am May?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Good morning. My respect to the University President of Samar State University, Dr. Marilyn D. Cardoso, to the Vice Presidents and the units of and the heads of the various units, most especially to the Vice President for Student Affairs and Services, Ma'am Maria Fe P. and to the Director of the Student Welfare and Development Services, no other than a dear classmate, shall I say, Dr. May V. Canyal, and to the Head of the Career and Placement Services of the University, Ms. Maria Cristina Y. Abalos, to the staff and to the non-teaching force of Samar State University, and most especially to the students of the university. Good morning, maayong buntag. Greetings coming from Malaybalay, Bukidnon. So most particularly from Bukidnon State University. Maayong buntag. I'm actually indeed very honored and privileged to be invited this morning to talk about a very timely and very relevant topic which concerns most of our dear students across this period, karon nga mga panahon. So before we let me share na lang siguro my screen so that we can start off. Okay. So wait lang. I believe that this topic is really of great significance nowadays, because I'll share na lang. Okay. So I believe that this topic is really indeed very, very significant nowadays, especially for students, because they are actually now in the new learning era. I have really high regard for the Office of Student Services really to come up with such initiative on really, I believe this is just webinar one of a series of webinars which really highlights mental health for the whole month of November. So it's really a very good start now, because students have really encountered so many difficulties from the time that classes commence in August, and we're actually ending the semester by next month in December. So it's really very, very important that before we start another semester, we really have to go over and how they have really managed all throughout this whole new semester of really going over with printed modalities or online instruction. So hopefully that today we're going to be able to really somehow at least help our dear students to effectively manage academic requirements. And I really highlighted there during a pandemic, because we really are trying to put our best effort to normalize things. Diba? We're back to school, we're back to work, but we have to really get into our thoughts, then we always have to remember that we are still under a pandemic, especially for our brothers and sisters in Luzon and some parts of Visayas who have really been experiencing so much bad weather in the past few weeks. So everybody is still in a state of crisis right now, but we're trying to normalize things. But of course, when we talk about learning, then we also have to really equip ourselves on what are the proper or what are the most appropriate ways of really effectively managing the requirements that we are really having in school, especially for those students who really are having little access to resources. So hopefully in the next few minutes you're going to be learning something from our discussion this morning. Okay. Just like any other mental health webinar, I think we normally would ask the question, how are you today? The question, how are you today, is one of the most commonly used questions all throughout this pandemic. And I would say it's actually one of the most abused questions. It's really one of the most abused ng mga pangutana, because we normally would just utter the question, how are you today? And at times we are just using it just to start a conversation without really, it comes spontaneous in us. And the normal response to this question are actually, there are two lang daw. It's either I'm fine and I'm okay. So when we get to see our students, okay, how are you? And then the student would normally just answer the question, I'm fine, ma'am, I'm okay, sir. And do we really believe that the student on the other end is really fine? If you are asking your classmate this question, and seemingly the classmate would really answer, I'm okay, it's okay, fine, okay ako. Do you really believe that the student genuinely answered the question na okay ra gyud siya? So let's give another tone to that single-liner question today. And for about 15 to 20 seconds, I want you to I want you to re-examine. I want you to recollect yourself. I want you to really introspect on the topmost emotions that you are having in the past couple of months. By the time that we commence classes in August, September, October, November, we're down now to December. How are you coping with your current state right now as a student? How are you today on a Friday morning? How are you today while listening now, while attending to your Facebook live stream? How are you while attending to this Zoom meeting? How are you feeling at this very hour while you are actually attending to this talk? About 15 seconds to re-introspect, or to re-examine and to introspect yourself. Okay, so I hope by now that you have somehow re-examined what you are feeling and what are you experiencing at the moment. We might have mixed of emotions. We normally have mix of emotions, but there is really one top emotion that would really top them all. There is really that very, very prominent and salient emotion that would really top all the emotions that you have. And I want you to really remember, I want you to really put that in mind as we proceed to this next slide. So this is actually what we call the emotion balance. Okay, this is what we call the emotion balance. All the emotions that we are experiencing are actually plotted in 4 quadrants. We have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. So quadrant 1 are actually what we call now emotions that are relatively high, and they are actually pleasant and positive emotions. So the energy is high, the tension is high, such as being alert, excited, elated. You might be so excited right now because it's a Friday, you're going home. You might be very, very excited right now, or you're happy because you have passed all the requirements really due for this week. You might be elated because it's going to be weekend tomorrow and you're going to be going out and do some trekking. So these are what we call now emotions that are really belonging to quadrant 1. So are you there? Are you in quadrant 1? Are you elated right now? Are you extremely high right now? Are you happy right now? Because if you're not in quadrant 1, you might be in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is still pleasant emotions. These are actually pertaining to pleasant emotions, which are basically positive in nature, but the level is relatively low. This pertains to emotions such as just being content, being relaxed, kalma. So pleasant siya, pero ang energy level is ubos lang. So might as well on a Friday, medyo okay lang ka. Kalma lang ka, relax lang ka, minaw-minaw lang ka karon. You're listening to this Facebook live stream because there are actually some post questions later on. So okay lang ka. So you might be in quadrant 2. Good for you. So if you're not in quadrant 1 and you're not in quadrant 2, then probably you are across the line. You might be in quadrant 3, which pertains now to negative emotions, and it could either be in two sets. It could either be quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Quadrant 3 pertains to emotions that are actually relatively low and they are negative in nature. Ubos lang ang energy pero unpleasant siya. Negative siya, such as being sad, depressed, tired. You might be very tired right now because it's Friday. Nag-submit ka, you submitted all the requirements. You really did your best to really submit all the requirements in your Google Classroom that made you quite tired today because you slept at about 1 or 2 a.m. Or you're a bit depressed because you were not able to really catch up with the deadline in one major subject. Or you might just be so fatigued because you're having a hard time thinking, I don't have any more money. I don't have anything for lunch. I'm really all stressed out from all areas of my life. So you might be there in quadrant 3. Or you might be in quadrant 4. This is now pertaining to emotions that are relatively high ang energy, high ang tension. And the emotions are negative in nature, such as very angry, very stressed out, very sad, very upset, very tensed. So all of our emotions are actually plotted in these 4 quadrants. And why is it important for us to really identify which quadrant are we belonging at this present moment? Because once you have identified and once you have recognized your emotion, it's going to be the starting point of really catering to you the most appropriate need that you are needing at the moment. So it's very, very important for students like you that you really have to have that certain level of self-awareness. And I normally also tell my students in our school that everything starts there with self-awareness. Kaya lang, with going back to the question that we have a while ago, how are you today? You know, the most common responses that I normally get whenever I do seminar workshops on this one is that all emotions are actually plotted in quadrants 1 and quadrant 2. When I do this in face-to-face workshop seminars, I normally just really put a big quadrant there on the floor, and then I seemingly would really get a very good percentage of people placing themselves in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 2. Why is that so? Why is people normally asking the question, how are you today, with really just okay? And when we have okay as a response, we normally would have in mind that okay is really in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 2. Because we have the kind of perception that the okay quadrants are quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. And the not okay so much quadrants are really in quadrant 3 and in quadrant 4. So let's go back again to that. How are you today? Where are you today? Are you in quadrant 1? Are you in quadrant 2? Are you in quadrant 3? And are you in quadrant 4? Because once you have identified your emotions there, that's going to be the starting point for emotions to be validated. That's going to be the starting point of emotions to be regulated. Because you cannot regulate emotions if you have not identified and recognized your emotions. You cannot regulate emotions if emotions are not validated. You cannot regulate emotions without going through that process. So, by this slide here, our dear students, it does not really matter where are you in the quadrant now. It does not make you less of a person if you're in quadrant 4. It does not make you less of a person if you're in quadrant 3. It does not, of course, it's very good if you're in quadrant 1 right now and if you're in quadrant 2. because what we are trying to get from here is that we know that where you are coming from, so that when you go now and go and ask help from your guidance offices now, we are actually very knowledgeable, and you by yourself, ikaw mismo, you really are aware of what your current state is. So muna din ang ginaingon that it is okay not to be okay. And I believe that there's another webinar on this one. So I would not really discuss. This is just a preliminary activity. So I believe that you will have one for this one. So it is okay not to be okay. But if you're not okay all the time, then it's a different story. So I think that would be seemingly discussed in the next webinar na dayon. Okay? So it's important that on a Friday morning, you know where you're coming from. Okay? So you know what type of emotions, what kind of emotions you're having at the moment. So now let's now proceed now to the main event. Okay, we're talking about how to manage requirements in the new learning era. So what are basically the challenges that you're experiencing at the moment? So I would just have to really just recall some of the challenges and difficulties that our students in our school are actually experiencing at the moment. One, of course, is really internet connectivity. It's really the access to resources, the access to internet connection. So that's why our students really resorted now to really having printed modules, because majority of our students, and I think even in your university, are really having a hard time with internet connection. And I think this is not just true with state universities, even private institutions, private colleges and private schools are still facing this type of challenge when we talk about internet connectivity. So it's not something lang that is very, very unique to your experience, because everybody is really experiencing internet connection. Even gali with faculty, even gali with our own webinars, our own Zoom and Google Meets, we're still having this challenge right now. So I think it's really one of the most, it's really the topmost. Second could either be related to this one is really now the access to resources, because several students, because they're living in the remote areas, and I think for some of you, you don't really have the connection there, you don't have the stable connection. Normally some of the students would still be really renting space now in the poblacion, in sa town, in the city proper, for them to really get very stable access to internet. So by that, which means to say they're having now financial constraint, because they still have to really cope with it's just like the normal day that they have, the normal school days. They go with their food, they go with the rental of the space, they go with the load pa every week. So it's going to be very challenging. It's still very challenging, because aside from that, there's the overwhelming requirements from all teachers, of course, from all subjects that you have at hand. So wala panahon man sa isa ka subject, another subject is getting in, and then there's another one. So all requirements are piling now. And you are thinking of your connection, you are thinking of what to eat for lunch, you are thinking of the available resources now, how to pay your landlord, you are thinking now of your pamasahe going home, and you are thinking of your requirements which are long overdue. And I think that's enough challenge for any particular student at this present time. So the question now is, what are your experienced difficulties? So as students now of Samar State University, I think you also have your own unique experiences. You also have your own difficulties, which might really be very and really similar to other state U students. And there are also some experiences that might just be very unique to your own. So this is very, very important, because once we have acknowledged our difficulties, once we have assessed our needs, it's going to be the starting point for the Office of the Student Services to really come up and to cater appropriate solution to address your needs. So if there are actually series of surveys, going over, detailing about your current difficulties, please find time to really answer these surveys, to really go over with these instruments for you to really be properly assessed. Because we could not readily provide your needs if you would not really assert, and if you would not really somehow share your current experiences. So your current experiences right now, my dear students, might really be similar with the experiences that we are having here in our state university, but you could also be having your own unique experiences. And hopefully that the next slides would be able to really help you in effectively managing your academic challenges at the moment. Okay, so how do we effectively manage academic requirements? So we are ending the semester by next month, by December. I think we have the same academic calendar. So we're ending the semester by December, and you're way down now to from August, September, October, down to November. Imagine you have survived already 4 months, and we have 1 month to go. We're finishing the semester. And as guidance designate for the College of Arts in our university, I still get several feedback of students really wanting to drop their subject, of students really having a hard time with their modules, of students really having a hard time with teachers not available for them not available for consultation, of students really having a hard time managing household chores at the same time academic requirements. So how do we effectively manage and still come up with academic requirements nga dili lang gyud for compliance lang pod, but of course we have to see to it that it's still above par nga atong performance pod. So first and foremost is that we have to really effectively manage academic stress, because once a student is stressed out, the student could not think properly, and the student could not really handle effectively all the other necessary requirements which she or he needs to comply with. So we have to identify the stressors that we are experiencing. We have to effectively identify ways and means and how to manage academic stress. So how do we define stress? And I believe that for some of you who are psych majors, for some of you who have really attended webinars on stress management, you might really be very familiar now on the definition of stress. But this is just now for the sake of those students who is still having a hard time understanding the concept of stress. Because when we talk about pandemic, when we talk about global crisis, when we talk about COVID-19, ang very equivalent terms niya karon is really mental health and really stress, managing stress. So when we talk about stress, it's basically when the demand is greater than the resources. So demand is greater than resources. D is greater than R, which means to say that demand at school is greater than your resources. The demand in your subject is greater than what you could readily afford. And these resources could pertain to what? To time, to money, to access to internet connection. So which means to say, if the teacher would give now the requirement and is asking you to pass it the following day, the student, you as a student, would normally experience stress. Why? Because the body is threatened right now. Because the body, the brain can actually identify that, oh my God, the demand is so great. The demand is greater because the resources, the deadline is actually tomorrow, and I still have several tasks which needs to really be complied, and it's now overlapping from one another. Galumba na lang sila. They're actually overlapping na. So the tendency is the student feels stressed out. And it's a normal reaction. It's a normal reaction for somebody to experience that. So the thing here is that we have to understand stress. Unsa gid ay na si stress. And by understanding stress, diba, it's defined as the demand is greater than the resource. And then we have to identify now the stressors that we have at hand. We have to identify now the stages of stress, that when you say you're stressed out, it doesn't mean naman dire-diretso na once you get encounter with the stressor, stress na dayon ka, because it comes in three stages, right? There's awareness, aware pa ka, and then you're trying to cope up, that's the second stage. And the third stage there is that you tried to really cope up, but you could not really cope up. So the tendency is that's the time that you experience now fatigue. That's the time that you are experiencing really chronic stress na dayon. So by the moment that you get to encounter now, your teacher really sent now the activity modules, the modules, the PDF, could it be, or ang iyang modules, the online modules over your Google Classroom or over your FB group chat. I remember one student of mine, it's not really my student, but a student in our college who sought counseling session with me, because every time daw nga mutingog na, every time that there's a buzz now in the Gmail or in the group chat sa Facebook, she actually is developing na dayon anxious reactions over that. Her heart is really beating so fast. She has palpitations because she has in mind already that once there's a new message, once there's a new buzz already, oh my God, it's another requirement. So imagine how traumatized she feels every time. That's why she doesn't want to look na over her Facebook Messenger and over her Gmail. So the tendency is that we have to identify. Kasi stage 1 of stress is just awareness. And then stage 2 is that you're trying to overcome, but stage 3, if not overcome, is the tendency that you really develop stress. You try to identify also your stressor. Of course, this is not really a workshop seminar on stress, but I'm just giving you an overview of that. Identify your stressor, because for some, your stressor might not really be stressor for others, because in the second column there, stress is self-generated. For example, your teacher in your major class really asks you this requirement. And then the way you look at the requirement, oh my God, it's so stressful. Kana nasadya na naman, ayoko niyan. And the other classmate did not feel stressed out because the other classmate actually felt that this was really beneficial on his end or her end, because she or he sees opportunities in that requirement. So you see here, at times, stress is not really, they actually say that it's self-generated. What could be stressful to you might not really be stressful for another person. What could be stressful for your classmate might not really be stressful to you. So it's just how you look at the situation. Just like looking at now the current modality that you chose, you opted for printed module, and you're having now printed module, and then the thing there is that you never run out of rant, you never run out of complaint, because you always get to see now the not so okay in every situation. Stress is really using that perspective. Stress comes there when you always see the not so good in every situation. So I'll be discussing that when we proceed now with reframing later on. So you turn now your distress into eustress. So students, when you say stress is not just all negative, okay? Because when we talk about stress, it could either be positive stress, which means eustress, or negative stress, which means distress. So why is stress important? Because if there is no stress, you could not be motivated. Say, for example, if the teacher did not put a deadline on a requirement, of course, siguro we're quite flexible with deadlines right now because we understand that we are in a pandemic state right now. But there are just some cases now when teachers would have to really put deadlines. Kasi when the teacher would not be putting deadline, you could not really be working on your specific outputs. Why? Because we have in mind na December pa na siya when the semester would end. But if there's a specific deadline, what happened now is that your emergency hormones would be working out. You get motivated to really finish because the teacher mentioned that the deadline is on Friday at 12 o'clock noontime. And then all the energy, the body is really helping you out cope with the deadline. and really made you pass the requirement before 12 o'clock on Friday, which means to say you're able to do things, you were motivated to really comply with the requirement, and thank you to stress, because that positive stress helped you move with that, helped you comply with the requirement. But if you have the other way of looking at it, so muna dayon ng negative na dayon si stress. So it's very, very important that we have to really identify on how are we turning positive stress, or how we are turning negative stress into positive stress. So very, very important for students, because once imo na siyang makitaan, you're able to look at the opportunities on how you are able, you're able to really look at from other lenses on how you are able to make opportunities from that single circumstance that you are experiencing. So that's the thing here. Okay, just a little thing lang ha. Okay, once a student is stressed out, you know what happened to you? There's what we call hippocampal atrophy, amygdala, and the prefrontal. Okay, just a little thing lang. Medyo, I believe nga medyo matatalino na yung mga psych majors for this one, very physiological. But for normal non-psych students or non-biology students, just a little thing on how stress would affect learning. Okay. Once you are experiencing chronic stress, I'm talking about chronic stress because stress could either be acute or chronic. When you say acute, medyo makaya lang, kaya na, medyo there's a stress and then na-overcome the stress, so hindi siya long-lasting, so it's acute stress. But when you say about chronic stress, for some students who might really be experiencing this right now, there's one requirement, okay, pasa. And then there's another requirement, and another requirement, and another requirement. Parang, ma'am, it's endless. Walang katapusan. I'm all stressed out. So, usually, if the body is stressed out, you know, you have your amygdala there, that the pink portion there. The amygdala is actually the portion of the brain which serves as your alarm system. It's the alarm system. If the amygdala could detect that there's an additional requirement, that there are other requirements from other subjects, automatically the amygdala would really be sending signals to the brain and to other parts of the bodies. The brain now would normally dictate now the other parts to cope now with the pressing situation or the current stressor. So automatically the amygdala would say, okay, requirement, deadline, coming up. Oh my God, there's piling already. There's one for major subject. There's for stat. There's for major. There's for minor subject. Oh my God, all deadlines are due on Monday. So the tendency here, it's the amygdala. So the amygdala would be sending emergency hormones or the stress hormones. You have, of course, the adrenaline hormones, ganang paspas na kay ka. You have the noradrenaline hormones. Pinaka-worst among the public enemy stress hormone is the cortisol. You know what happened? Kasi if there's too much stress, then there's too much release of cortisol. What happened to the cortisol, guys and class? Students, our dear students, is that it would now disturb the function of the hippocampus. The hippocampus is yung katabi niya, the adjacent part of the amygdala. And you know what? What's being taken care of by the hippocampus? It's actually in charge of memory, it's in charge of the memory, some part of learning, and then it also is controlling emotion there at some point. So the tendency here, once you're all stressed out, diba, you easily forgot things. You easily are having a hard time recalling specific pag nasa stress ka na, and you're having a hard time really facilitating learning. Why? Because the cortisol hijacked the functions of the hippocampus. Pag grabe si stress pa talaga, pati ang function ni prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, the seemingly blue part there, which is basically in charge now for learning, for problem solving, and for other higher functions of the brain, is disrupted because na-disturb na sa cortisol. And cortisol are actually released once the body is stressed out. That's why we have to be careful so that we could really think properly. We could really tell that our modules are properly, the activities are properly answered then. We make sure then that when we are stressed out, we find time to really release the stress before we go over with our modules. Okay. So right now, I'm using the concept of burnout, but usually burnout is dili siya pang student. It's really more of a concept used in occupational. It's really more of occupational phenomenon. But usually siguro si student at some point, di ba, pag stress ka na, over-engaged ka lang, reactive ka masyado, lagi kang complain ng complain. Ba't naman si teacher galon? Ba't naman si ano? Oh, di ba, ganyan-ganyan ka masyado. But you are still, there's so much anxiety, you're still quite hyperactive. But once you're burned out already, guys, what happened na daw, our dear students? Wala ka na talagang energy, wala ka ng motivation, and then it's emotionally toiling on your end. So in this illustration, si Eric is stressed out there. But he still have the time to really have his picture taken, di ba? Kaya lang medyo disgusted na masyado yung pagmumukha niya, medyo very tired and fatigued na talaga. But when Eric was really burnt out, Eric was too tired to pose actually for a picture, for a photo opportunity. So as you are listening this morning, our dear students of Samar State University, hopefully that wala pa ta sa stressed Eric. Hopefully wala pa ta sa burnt out Eric. And hopefully you are still managing yourself at the very moment. Because okay lang magpa-stressed out. Of course, I believe that you still have the offices, the Office of Student Services who could readily attend to your needs. But let's not wait for ourselves to really be experiencing chronic stress, or let's not really allow ourselves to really experience burnout. Of course, burnout is really occupational in nature sa professional level lang talaga. But of course, as students, we also get to experience that. And for students, it might also be nadayon mo, comorbid nadayon siya with other experiences such as experiencing anxiety. And then, of course, we tend to romanticize raba adolescent depression nowadays. Plus, we get to see newsfeed over social media of students really inflicting pain in themselves. So the tendency here is that it could really be just the starting point could just be academic stress. So it's very important that we get to really effectively manage this stress so that we could really perform well in our academic requirements. Okay, so one here is really awareness. ABC, awareness. Identify your source of stress. How do you react? So it's this was the thing that I was mentioning a while ago. Even with emotions, you have to really be aware of your emotion. You have to be aware of your current state. Because if you are always answering okay and you are not really okay, the tendency is that people will perceive you to really be in that state. So we could not really address properly your needs because you are not really fully genuine with what you are feeling at the moment. So you have to be aware with your current state. You have to really be aware of your triggers. So every Friday, I feel so disappointed. I mean, every Friday, I feel so disappointed. Why? Why are you not okay on a Friday? Diba? How are you today? I'm not okay. Okay. Why are you not okay today? Basta I'm not okay, ma'am. I'm not so sure. Basta I'm not okay. But it's also very important for you to really identify why are you not okay? Because beyond that not okay umbrella, if we call it now, if we try to really dig deeper on that, there are actually other emotions that would really somehow that would really give us the necessary answers to your not okay answer. So for example, you're not okay right now because you are hurt, because you're not in the dean's list. You are not okay right now because you are sad, because you were not able to really get a good grade in one major subject. You are not okay right now because are you envious or jealous because your other classmate made it to the dean's list? Are you not okay right now? Or are you mad because, or are you angry with your boyfriend or your girlfriend because your boyfriend and girlfriend did not reply to you since 6 a.m. this morning? So what is the source of you're not okay. You have to identify your source of stress. You have to identify your triggers. Because if you could readily identify your trigger, you can actually control and regulate your emotions. So for example, your trigger could be your teacher. Every time your teacher would text you at about, or would really be sending now some cue, would really be sending now some updates now on Google Classroom or over Facebook chat, automatically your response is that you feel so heavy at the end of reading the updates. So might as well, you could start your day by not reading it, sa. Because you know you're triggered that once you open already the group chat, oh my God, I'm so low again. So why not manage that? You start your day with something that's so right for you. You start your day with something that would uplift you. You start your day by doing something that would really facilitate the strengths that you have. So identify your triggers, identify the source of stress, identify your stressors, because it all starts with awareness. And then once you have it already, that's already B, finding the balance now. Because there's just a thin line between use stress and distress. You identify now, oh my God, all deadlines are on Monday. How can I make this as an opportunity on my end? So you try to, if you look at that from that perspective, you always get to see the positive, the negative thing. But if you try to look at the other side, oh my God, there are other things. Because if I pass it on by Monday, imagine by Tuesday and Wednesday, I could also attend to other needs at home or other needs in the organization that I belong, which means to say, passing it all together my Monday would give me opportunities to attend to other areas of my life. I could spend time with my boyfriend. I could spend time with some chores at home. I could spend time with my online business. So looking at it as a eustress instead of a distress. Reframing, okay? I'll go to that later on, Naman said. And then we have control. Okay, control. 90-10 secret, if you're familiar with this one, from Stephen Covey, the author of Highly Effective People. 90% of the things that's happening around us is within our control. But there's that little portion of 10% that's beyond our control. You wanted to really get in control of so many things, diba? You wanted to really be in control of your grades. You wanted to be in control of your requirements. Say, for instance, you are passing now a requirement which is actually due on 3 o'clock, Friday, 3 o'clock. You tried you try your very best to really have your requirements. You encoded and come up with a very good output. And the moment that you're about to send it to your Google Classroom, automatically the internet connection went down. And your normal reaction would be, you would be ranting at the top of your voice. You would be complaining now to I don't know, your connection there. You might be complaining now, my God, PLDT, my God, Globe, ano ba, my God. You would be you might be posting or really shouting your rant over social media and all of these things then. And we take into account then that we cannot control. As much as we wanted to really put our control on all things, always remember that there's really a 10% that's beyond our control. And this 10% that is beyond our control are things that we should not be putting too much effort now, because the more we really try to control the 10%, the more we get stressed out. What are other parts of the 10%? The opinions of your classmates. You're so bothered with the opinions of your classmate that you passed on time and then wala pa sila nakapasa, and then you said that I need to pass on time because this is how I look at things. I need to pass before the deadline. And then your classmates are telling you, oh my God, come on naman. Pakisama naman dyan. Pakikisama naman. Huwag ka naman mag-pass. And you cannot really allow that, because your personality trait that's really part of you. You need to pass it on time. And then you passed. And then you seemingly get so anxious because everybody in the class in your block gets to really talk behind your back that ano ba yan, very ano siya. And consider that as part of the 10%. You could not control the thoughts of other people. You could not control what other people are thinking about you. So that's part of that 10% that is beyond our control. You cannot control the multi-cab, you can control the jeepney, that the more you wanted to be in school at 8 o'clock, but the jeepney is really having a hard time and pleasurely just looking at around without bothering that you would really be late. And you notice that the more you are so anxious and the more you're stressed out, the more that time is really moving so fast. But that's part of the 10%. That's beyond our control. You cannot control what your teacher think about you. You cannot control what your classmates, so always remember that there are things beyond our control. When you cannot control what's happening there, control the way you respond to what's happening. And there, diha na dayon. When you try to control the way you respond to what's happening, there where your power comes in. Okay? So, awareness. Okay? So, when you're aware, it's not actually an admission of weakness or the inability to cope. It's a way to identify the problem and to plan the measures appropriate to overcome the problem. So, there's another one here, mind traps. So you students, you might also be having mind traps right now. Mind traps are actually the things that keeps bothering you at the moment. So instead of really effectively cope with the requirements that you have at hand, every now and then these things pop up in your mind, and unrealistic expectations. So because we are going through a pandemic right now, of course it's expected that we are learning, but of course the syllabuses nga are recalibrated, are readjusted to just include the basic competencies that we have, because we cannot expect that all our students, and seemingly, we cannot really expect that you would really be master of all the competencies that we have at hand. So you have to set your own expectation that when it was still normal time, I could readily do these things. But how come right now that I could not do anymore all the things that I'm supposed to be doing? I'm a working student. I'm doing this and that, but I'm actually at loss now in doing all these roles that I'm usually performing. So you have to take into account that your expectations has to be realistic in nature. We are going through a global crisis. Everything is really adjusting to the new normal. So make sure then that your expectations are actually just grounded to the normal setting. Okay, so what I normally do, Gali, with my students, I don't pressure them so much. Okay, if they say that they cannot pass, of course I would still be very, very empathic and understand them, but I would normally would tell them that I would not expect you to really be master of all the series of personality that we have at hand. So at the end of the week, at least just master one concept of Freud, or just go over with one concept of Carl Rogers, just one concept that you could readily apply to your life. And even to yourself as students, do not pressure yourself to really learn all the things there. Diba? Just have that standard in you that at least I could learn this concept for the week. And for next week, this concept. I won't pressure myself, because at the end of the week, at the end of the day, of course, we still have to value our well-being. Okay, taking things personally. Do not take things personally if your classmates would really be telling you that why did you know, or your teacher might as well would really be having some feedback on you, and then you took these things personally. It's also one thing that would really be stressing you out. Self-criticism. I have some students as well who have experienced certain levels of insecurities and inferiorities over the pandemic, because they could readily experience that medyo talagang wala talaga kami, medyo yung economic status namin is really very low, and then I'm not fluent in English. I could not readily attend now to the modules because the modules are seemingly very hard, and then I could not express myself because I wanted to really express my thoughts, but I could not readily do so because nobody could help me express my thoughts because I'm having a hard time expressing them in English. So the tendency is the student felt very, very experienced low self-esteem and ended up with criticizing herself or himself. So it's also one thing there. And then there's over-analyzing. There's one One deadline pa lang, and then you came up with so many things in mind na dayon. Oh my God. It's just like your mind is just like mara siyang welcoming party that once you entertain one thought, there's another thought that comes in, another one, and you know what, they all pile up, and where are you when they're piling up? You're down there because natabunan ka na with all the things that you have in mind. It's just a very simple things, but you tend to overanalyze things, and the tendency is you feel so incapable. Why? Because you're already so overwhelmed with the situation, even if the situation is seemingly just very small. Because of your over analysis, the tendency is what? You get so overwhelmed with the thought, and the moment that you try to answer with that simple question, you could not readily answer already. Why? Because the thought already the thought already eat you up. So avoid as much as possible over analyzing, though the tendency, human nature, would really yield us into over analyzing. But of course, every now and then we have to check for our mind traps. Okay, so here it's the 90-10 secret that I was telling you a while ago. When you cannot control what's happening, control the way you respond to what's happening in you, and there your power comes in. So you try to imagine that there's power in control. So now another way here is another way of managing academic stress is changing your thought patterns. Reframing leads to act of gratefulness. Okay, reframing means you try to look at from other side of the lens, because if you're always looking at it from this angle, might as well lahat ng reklamo makikita mo, because on that angle ka lang palaging nakatingin. So if you try to look at from other instances, you get to see that, wow, there's another view. Wow, there's another perspective pala that I could appreciate this current situation that I am experiencing. So once you do kasi with reframing, you get to savor and experience gratefulness. So for example, in the middle of a conversation sa family nyo, when you went home over dinner with your mother and father, biglang nag-brown out. And then pag nag-brown out, I could also hear that you will also have the same initial reaction as ours here in Bukidnon. Pag brown out, yung electric cooperative nyo ay naku-curse, di ba? Sa amin kasi it's Buseco. So if ever we get to experience brownout, we normally would yell, oh my God, Buseco, why brownout? We pay our bills on time, but you always get to have brownouts every now and then. And once there is brownout, our normal reaction is really unpleasant. Our normal reaction is really negative. We tend to really rant. We tend to complain. But let us look at brownout from another perspective. Let us look at brownout and blackout from another angle, from another. Okay, wait lang. Let us look at brownout from another lens, from another perspective, and you get to appreciate brownout. Because if you get to look at blackout and brownout, you try to imagine that pag nag-black out and it's evening and you're done with dinner already, di ba? It's that moment when the family is all gathered. It's that moment when all phones are shut down. It's that moment when you get to be physically present in one area of the house and talking about something that's scary and talking about mga aswang-aswang, and you get to appreciate that, wow, because of this blackout, because of this brownout, I get to physically be present with my family. I get to be physically present with my parents. I get to be physically present with my younger brothers and sisters. And that's actually what we call looking at it, reframing, and looking at it from a different angle. It's also the same with your instruction, with the type of modality that you have experienced at the moment. You always get to complain with the Google Classroom. You always get to complain with the printed module. You always get to complain with the online modules. Try to really reframe. Try to look at it from other angles and learn to look at opportunities that you can actually have from the current situation that you are having at the moment. So I think for some of you, you're very familiar with this one. If you look at the picture and you always get to see two old faces facing each other, and by the time you look at it, silang dalawa pa rin yung nakikita mo, it actually means that you're not reframing. It actually means that you're not looking at it from different angle. It actually means that you are just using one particular perspective. So, pag iba yung perspective mo, makikita mo there's two men sitting down, there's one playing the guitar, there's one on top of his head, there's a woman there standing by the door, and there's a chalice or a ciborium in the middle. So when you get to see all this other stuff there, which means to say, congratulate yourself because you have other means of really looking at situation, looking at it from different angles and reframing it and looking and using different perspectives to really look at the situation on a more beneficial end. Okay? So, reframing. Instead, kasi pag nai-reframing, ma-savor mo, and then it results now to gratefulness. And then you always get to complain with your life. And then you have to be, you have to have that list of gratefulness every day. What are 5 things you are grateful today before you go to sleep? And you get to realize that I have internet connection. I am in school right now. I am enrolled. I have food on my table. I am in a very cozy place. And I am blessed with a family. And you get to realize that the life that you are always complaining every single day is actually the dream lives of other people. It's the dream life of your classmate. It's the dream life of that particular student in the satellite campus. It's the dream life of the student in other remote areas. So look at it from different angle, reframe, and then savor, and it would give you act of gratefulness. Okay, rewinding the brain. This is what I'm telling you a while ago, that at times the brain is really very focused now on the not so okay because the brain is wired that way. So si brain kasi may hard wirings, diba? The brain has hard wirings, and basically the brain can really detect what the not so okay in every situation. So for example, there's a band paper there. It's a clean sheet of paper, and I get to really put a single dot of pencil pen on the middle, and I get to show it to you, students. And normally, about 90% of students would really be answering. I would ask the question, okay, what do you see now on the paper? And then, what do you see? And then the students would actually tell me, Ma'am Xyle, I get to see the dot in the middle. Only 10% of students would really affirm that I see a clean sheet of paper with a very small dot in the middle. Which means to say our brain is wired that way. Because si brain, kung ano yung hindi okay, derecho, yun yung makikita niya. Because in the system, in the wirings, the system is really wired to be okay. So if there is something not okay, the brain can seemingly detect that. So that's what we call now the term objectivity bias. So how do we rewire the brain? So that we can see the good in every situation, so that we could not readily complain in our modules right now, so that we could not readily really be ranting lang over things that we are experiencing, and instead we get to also really see the other side of what we are experiencing. So we need to rewire, and one good habit of one very effective habit of that, one effective means of that, of rewiring, is really just nurturing a habit, nurturing your strength every day for 11 minutes. Do one particular thing or engage in one productive thing every single day, which means to say it could either be something that you are very passionate about. It could either be something that you're very, very interested of doing, just like, say, for example, attending and on this end, of course, it's really studying, siguro, di ba? So say, for example, you don't really like answering your module. You don't really like going over with reading your PDF module. So just engage to it in 11 minutes a day. And you know what? 11 minutes a day in 30 days, it becomes a habit na dayon. Which means to say, you need not force yourself. You need not really coerce yourself to engage in 11 minutes, because after 1 month, it comes spontaneously in you. It comes natural in you. So automatically in 90 days, that's 3 months, it becomes a part of your lifestyle. So hopefully, if you're answering your modules not on a weekly basis, but you're doing it at least every day, you try to imagine that at the end of December, your body is used already to that system. Your brain is already rewired to that. And by January, kung wala ka pang modules, si brain is already all geared up because the system is already geared up to really answering modules every single day. So which means to say, there's that act of rewiring. We could readily rewire our brain by doing or engaging in just 11 minutes a day and forming a habit in 30 days and really just changing your lifestyle in a span of 90 days. Okay, so checking your frame of reference as well. You check your frame of reference. It's okay for you to really just be complying with one module a day. But what you did is that you check the reference man of your classmates, and your classmates man who's really aiming to be a cum laude is really having that reference of 5 activities a day. So it made you so stressed out. Why? Because you tried to compare your own frame of reference to your classmates. So it's okay for you to be finishing. You feel so good and happy finishing one module a day, one activity a day. But the moment your frame of reference was really compared to the frame of reference of your other classmates, this is now where stress is actually originating. Comparison. That's why at some point in time, di ba? Facebook and social media, Instagram, at some point they're not really quite helpful because they increase now your frame of reference. So you have to really respect and you have to celebrate your own frame of reference. It doesn't matter if you're finishing one a day because that's your speed, that's your pace, and you have to respect your own frame of reference. Do not get overwhelmed with the frame of reference of other classmates or of your other batchmates. So hedonic treadmill, if you wanted to really just, this is part of hedonic mass, subjective well-being, being happy. So if you're not okay and you're not really that happy, it's actually being mentioned here that it's like a treadmill. If you wanted to be okay and if you wanted to really be less stressed out, you have to make it intentional, meaning to say, working on your stress level is really just like working on a treadmill. If you stop, meaning to say, mutaas gyapon siya balik. So you have to make it intentional. That if I have to be okay, I have to make it intentional to really find ways and means for me to really be okay, to stay in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 2. Because if we go back to the quadrants that I was telling you a while ago, some of our students, or even those students who are clinically diagnosed to have clinical depression, they are actually stuck in quadrant 4 and quadrant 3. They wanted to really be moving now to quadrant 2 and quadrant 1. But the mere fact there is that they're having so much difficult emotions that they're stuck up in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. So for your normal human individuals, we get to experience the fluidity of emotions. That we get to experience quadrant 4, 3, 2, and 1. And then, of course, pag you are a dense lister, of course, you're in quadrant 1. But if you did not make it, you might be in quadrant 3. So that's why they actually tell us that there is what we call fluidity of emotion. A healthy human individual, a mentally healthy human individual gets to experience all 4 emotions, gets to experience all 4 quadrants of emotions, but we see to it that we don't stuck in one particular quadrant because that's going to be something very alarming. Okay. So 1:3, if you're not so okay as you're listening today to me right now, you're having a hard time coping with your requirements, might as well you get into 1:3 ratio by Barbara Fredrickson, which means to say 1 unpleasant situation, 3. You have to really compensate with 3 positive things. You're not so okay, you have a low score now in your major subject. try to come up with three pleasant circumstances. One, I'll drink my favorite coffee. Two, um, I'll compose a song. Three, I'll communicate with my barkada in college, in high school. Which means to say, before you go to sleep, you're quite okay now because it was compensated by at least three things. So one unpleasant situation, try to come up with three pleasant things to compensate for your unpleasant experience. So effective time management skills, I just go over to them just very briefly. Pomodoro, chunking, recognizing, and then be assertive. Okay. Time management, you have to really be organized. You have to really go over with what must be done, what should. Try to really go over with the things that are needing really prioritization. Cut out wasting time. You know, Facebook is really so much of a time wasting scheme. Because the moment the moment you have with your cell phone, automatically you go with letter F, Facebook, and the moment you have time with your laptop, automatically you go over with Facebook na dayon. And then we get to tell ourselves that, okay, I'll spend 15 minutes. I'll spend 30 minutes na lang. And then you never, unconsciously, you spend at least 2 hours na dayon over Facebook. And what a time waste you have if you are always going over with if you're not able to manage time wasters. So cut out the time wasting, cut out as much as possible attending to chat. If it's not so much important, then learn to say bye for now because I have to attend to my other things. Learn to drop unimportant activities and then learn to say no or delegate. It's very important to say no because at home, if you might be experiencing too much stress because you're doing your household, you're doing your modules at the same time doing your household chores, and then your parents are telling you to do these things, you can actually assert that, Ma, Pa, can I do this later because I still have to finish this module? Or your classmate might be asking help from you because you are the matalino ng klase and everybody gets to help. Gets to ask help from you that, can you help us with this module? Can you help us with this one? And then you cannot say no because you wanted to really just help out everybody. It's okay to help out, but it's also okay to say no because you're also protecting your mental health. Okay? Learn to say no and learn to delegate your tasks as well. Okay. Now, this is one effective time management skill. And normally, I've been teaching my students about the Pomodoro technique. The Pomodoro is actually an Italian word for tomato. It's actually, there's an application for such, which means to say, the Pomodoro as an application would be makompleto siya in 25 minutes. And then, what we normally tell our students here is that you have to really set your clock for 25 minutes. And then by setting your clock to 25 minutes, make sure then that you are focused on your job. You don't entertain any form of disruption. You don't entertain any form of distraction, or you're just solely focusing on what specific task that you're having at hand. So for example, you're answering this module on a major subject. And then you set now the application or your timer to 25 minutes. And then the moment you're done with the 25 minutes, in the application, actually, makompleto na si tomato, or you're done with one Pomodoro. You know what? This is very applicable, especially for students who are doing their thesis right now, especially for students who are doing their researches. When you are with RRL or review of related literature and you're having a hard time really just going over with particular things, you can set now to 25 minutes without distraction. And this is being, a lot of students are actually taking pride in finishing 4 or 5 Pomodoros a day, which means to say that they're actually having 25 minutes undisturbed time of really focusing on their task. So the challenge is, how many Pomodoros can you finish in one day? For a starter, you could have at least 1 Pomodoro in the morning, 1 Pomodoro in the afternoon, and 1 Pomodoro at nighttime. And then you could be very proud of yourself that, yay, I finished 3 Pomodoros today. And that's good for a start, right? So it's really just focusing on the task without entertaining any distraction at all. And then you get to be amazed that the output is really very, very overwhelming. The output is really, you're able to really come out with efficient and effective output because you were so focused on the job. So you can try it, our dear students. Try to challenge yourselves on how many pomodoros you can finish on a day. Even for teachers as well, because we're also having a hard time really managing the multiple roles that we're experiencing at the moment, especially for teachers who are really going over with their thesis, with their masteral thesis and dissertation. That could be also a very effective way of really managing your time. Okay, chunking, one step at a time, learning to eat the elephant piece by piece. The moment that you're so much focused on the task and then you get to have the overall picture, the tendency is you get overwhelmed. So don't let the entire staircase overwhelm you. Just focus on the first step. So if you're having a hard time just looking at the entire requirements for the whole semester, because you look at the prospectus and the syllabus at the beginning of the sem in August, and then you get so all stressed out just looking at, oh my God, I still have to pass this one in this subject and another one for this subject and another one. And then at the end of the first day, you were so tired, you were so toiled up because you were just overwhelmed with the requirements that you have at hand. Learning to eat the elephant piece by piece, just one piece at a time, just one requirement at a time, one sticky note at a time. Do not pressure yourself to put all sticky notes down in one day. And this is also what I do normally do at home or at school, in the office. I still have several sticky notes, and then I noticed that I cannot do all these things. I'm stressing myself out. So what I normally do is that, okay, I just have one sticky note in the morning and another sticky note. And then, of course, that's too much gratification on my end that I'm able to really do all these things. But pushing myself to do all those things might not be very good for me. So know your limits, know your triggers, and just go to it one by one. Do not overwhelm yourself. Okay, social network. Remember, it's very, very important during this time that we're doing physical distancing, but we're not really doing social distancing. So it's very, very important that you have a very good social network. You have your family with you. You have your group of friends with you over GC, because once you have this social network, it's going to be really a room for ventilation. And during this time of pandemic, it's very, very important that we do with emotional catharsis. You know, emotional catharsis is really releasing the pent up emotions that we have inside. So it could just be, if you don't have really a group of friends, you could really just be writing now your emotions right now. So the experience that you are having at this very moment, just putting it down, because once the brain and the mind is all filled out, it could not think properly, just like what I mentioned earlier. And the moment you put it into writing, the moment you put it in your journal, the moment you put it into your diary, and the moment you tell it to anybody, everything is cleared here and is transferred there. So, which means to say you're having enough time now to really just go over with your current situation and think about better ways of really complying with your academic requirements. So creating your learning space, I know everyone is not really blessed with a very good space, but even if you have a very limited space, make sure then that even in your room, in your house, you have a learning space that you call really as your own. Because once you have a learning space, it gives you that connection and that association that once I am in this area, automatically the brain cells would really help you to really prepare yourself in complying for your requirements. That's part of associative learning, creating your learning space. And then nurturing resourcefulness, discipline, and resilience. I believe that during this time, all students are quite resourceful. I think we have to be resourceful on our end, especially if we're having really a hard time really accessing to the things that we should be needing today. So I remember one student who does not have really a cell phone and a laptop. What he did is that he really was really writing a letter of appeal to their LGU, and then he was given a cell phone, but he was having a hard time with the cell phone still. He really was really writing letters now to the department, to the department offices of the government, and he was readily given a laptop by the department, by a particular department. So which means to say, it's really resourcefulness, learning to be madiskarte amidst this season. So it's very important that we're able to really come up with such access, because not everybody is really gifted with the access to resources. Okay, discipline, of course, very important. You can be having everything now. You can have all the resources that you have, the stable connection, everything. But if you don't have the discipline in you, still you will still have a hard time effectively managing your requirements. And the most important right now, ang pinakasikat na term and concept throughout this throughout this pandemic season, it's really resilience, or the art of bouncing back. So for students, you have survived August, you have survived September, you have survived October, and you are now surviving November. So which means to say, you are already having the attitude, or you're already having resilience in you. So hold on, bounce back, and continue to really tap it, because we're going to be ending the semester anytime soon in December. So because it's very important that at the end of the day, our dear students, you have to value self-care, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. So you cannot be a good student if you don't care about yourself. You cannot be a good daughter, a good son to your parents if you don't have self-care. You cannot be a good officer in your organization, in your club, if you don't have self-care. And you could not actually be a good student in your university if you actually don't value self-care. And mind you, that self-care is not just going over with your comfort food. It's not just going to the parlor. It's not just going and taking massage. Self-care is more than that. It's really evaluating and assessing the things that you wanted to avoid, and finding ways and means on how to go over with it. So you are avoiding these things. You don't like these things in your daily routine. So what are the better ways and means to cope with these things? Because these things are not readily beyond my control. These things are not really controllable. So you are preparing yourself for this one. You are taking care of yourself because you wanted to make yourself be ready at all times in all circumstances. So you could do with grounding technique, you could do with breathing technique there. These are mindfulness technique. But we have to remember that the most effective way to learning is still not compromising your well-being. Because I believe your administrators, the faculty would want to end the semester with you being mentally healthy. So, our dear students, how are you in filling up your emotional and psychological buckets? You could be learning right now, but at the same time, do not forget to fill in the buckets, to fill in your emotional and psychological buckets. And if you have filled your own buckets now, try to also fill in the emotional and psychological buckets of your classmates, of your friends, of your co-majors, of your batchmates. Because we may be learning now, we may be COVID-free, but we are not free from the risk of stress and anxiety. So together, let's take care of our well-being and make it the priority. We could still be learning, but we don't forget to take care of our mental health. So I believe that would be all lang siguro, dear students. Thank you so much for the time and for listening. I hope you did learn something from today's discussion. And I'll stop my screen share. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Miss Xyle. Actually, we've also learned a lot from your talk. We were listening intently, and yeah, really, before anything else, we should always consider, and we should always put our well-being as our top priority. So I hope everyone learned something today, and kasi based on observations, our psychological well-being is not really, sabi pa nga nila, hindi masyadong binibigyan ng importance. But of course, as what you've said, it is always important to always take care of ourselves before anything else. Okay, so thank you very, very much, Miss Xyle. And before we move on to the open forum, we will first have the awarding of Certificate of Appreciation. So let's call in the Vice President for Student Welfare and Development Services. I mean, Student Affairs. So let's call it Engineer Maria Lourdes Amante.
Kindly share. Good morning po. Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Can you enlarge, ma'am, ano? Okay. Pasensya na. Okay. Samar State University, Office of the University President, Catbalogan City. Certificate of Recognition is awarded to Xyle Fe A Verbal, PhD, in grateful recognition for imparting her valuable insights and expertise as a resource speaker during the webinar on how to manage academic requirements during pandemic, held on November 13, 2020 at Samar State University. Given the 13th day of November 2020 at Samar State University, Catbalogan City, Samar. Signed, Marilyn D. Cardoso, University President.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you also. Thank you. Congratulations, ma'am.
All right. So far we don't have questions. Siguro everything is clear. So thank you so much, Ms. Xyle, and we look forward to having you again, hopefully next year or for another webinar. Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
Let's move on to the next. So we all need people who will give us feedback because that's how we usually improve. And with this, please click the link for the attendance and feedback form, which is open until the end of the semester for the benefit of those who were not able to join us today. And please be informed that the certificates will also be given by then. And in the attendance form and attendance and feedback form, there are actually 5 questions to be answered that are related to the talk this morning. Okay. While waiting for some questions, meron, ma'am, we are still looking into it. We would like to acknowledge everyone who are with us today. Shout out. So good morning, SSU from Mikey Argobano. If you have questions, you can just key in our chat box. So we also have here Remar Kenneth Astorga from a VT Ed student. And still watching, Rina Semrino. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you learned something today from our speaker. Sige na, this is our time to ask our expert about how to manage academic requirements during pandemic, because I know not only the teachers or instructors are having a difficult situation right now. Actually, lahat tayo, every one of us, students, parents, teachers, administrators, because the situation now is very new to us. Although there are previous pandemics, this is new to us in our generation. So it seems that nobody's asking. Everything is clear, I guess. Okay. Um, uh, by the way, Xyle, please, please do not stop your video as we are going to have our photo up after this.
Sure, sure, ma'am.
That ends our webinar for this morning. But before we go, let me first acknowledge the following people for making this event possible. So for Miss Angie Machate and John Matra, our technical side, Miss Andrea Del Rosario and Grace Pacolor, the presentations, and Miss Mary Ann Aboles for the visuals, like the poster and the virtual background. Virginia, Glenn, and Flary, our logistics. So the whole President's Office team for lending us the boardroom for today's venue. I hope we can still borrow next time and the succeeding webinars. So I just would like to share this because I believe that teamwork is the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results. So thank you so much, everyone. Oh, before we go, my question pala. Wait. How, Misael, we have here a question from Adonis Pragas Jr. How can we apply the 11 minutes habit to pass our requirements?
Hi, yes. Thank you for that question, Sir Adonis. Okay. Basically, the 11 minutes pertains now to, it's actually a strength-based, and it's more of a strength-based intervention. It's really recognizing and going over with your strength. So for example, with the 11 minutes, so say for example, when you go over with your requirement and then automatically by just looking at your requirement without even reading them, you get so stressed out already, you can really find time to really just answer one requirement and spend about 11 minutes going over to it, just solely basically focus on really answering it, solely engaging yourself to the modules that you are answering, so not minding whatever is really disturbing you at the moment, solely engaging in that act for 11 minutes and have it the following day, Tuesday, and another day on Wednesday, and another day. And that's what because studies have shown then that if you do it now religiously and very focused, at least 11 minutes a day, that would seemingly form now a habit in 30 days. So once it is a habit, then, Sir Adonis, normally, if it's a habit, it comes spontaneously. You need not force yourself now to really go with your module in answering them. You need not force yourself to really read your modules. Why? Because if it's already a habit, it means to say it comes spontaneous, it comes spontaneous, it comes voluntary, involuntary na ka, that you go over with just reading them, that you go over with just answering them, because the brain is already wired to that system. Because you've been wiring your brain to really go with at least 11 minutes a day of answering it. So technically, after 1 month of continuously, religiously answering your modules for 11 minutes, you might really be just so amazed of yourself that the following month, without you forcing yourself to really answer and without you forcing yourself to read, the system in you, as the brain in you was rewired, is already telling you to go automatically read and answer, because the brain has been rewired to that particular behavior. So it's actually more of really it's strength based, because in this particular concept, Mangod, we don't consider that students have weaknesses. We don't consider that students have, you could have really things that you could not readily do at the moment, but we still consider them as strength. These are strength of lesser use, which means to say you can readily do with modules, you can readily do with reading as a strength. The only thing at this present moment is you did not engage in that particular strength. You could have the strength in reading your modules, but at this present moment, your other strengths were utilized in other areas pa. So if you could really invest in your strength of reading modules for at least 11 minutes a day, you might really just be amazed of yourself that by the end of the semester, your wirings in the brain, you is already very much wired to just be reading, and you could just be reading without forcing yourself because it comes spontaneously in you now. So it's much more of really um, nurturing your strength, towards complying your academic requirements. So whatever that strength could be on reading or answering or going over with online classes, just take some time to do with it at least 11 minutes a day. So in due time, that would be already part of the lifestyle that you would be living. Okay? So I think that would be all, Miss Christine.
Thank you so much, Miss Xyle. And we would like to acknowledge the presence of Consejal Josephine Pescos. She's with us today, Miss Xyle.
Good morning, ma'am.
We also have another question here, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess the question comes from a personnel. So the question, Ms. Xyle, is what advice can you give to teachers to lessen the academic stress of students?
Okay, so I think even in our own even in our own university, we also get to have the same experience as our students would normally really complain with the number of really of activities really piling up, and they're really overlapping now. So I think for teachers, I think we have been really oriented with this one, that we take into account really just the basic competencies that we have at the moment. So on my end, personally, as I am really going over with this one right now, I take into account then that at least I could really just give my students a very important input for at least one or two major concepts at least a week. I don't really so much pressure my students, because in the first place, yeah, we are really trying to normalize things. We try to really go back to our normal lives. But I think I've mentioned this in the earlier part of our talk, that we don't always compromise on our mental health. So these students are really banking on education. Of course, they wanted to really finish the degrees that they have at hand, but we take into account then that at this present moment, we have to work hand in hand with our students, because our students are not on the same, they're not on the same platform. They're not really on the same, diba, ground. Others really have readily access to resources, while others are also experiencing too much difficulties on their end. So let's just be more empathic on our end. And of course, yeah, I still have to get students come to me and PM me. Of course, we normally get the reaction that, oh my God, the student could not readily understand, or the student, but I always have this in mind that, okay, before I would give my reply and before I would give my response to this student, I should really have in mind that what should be this student be experiencing, what is the student experiencing at the moment. So we could never really tell that they are really going through a difficult time financially, emotionally, psychologically, or they've lost their loved ones. So it's this time of year, and it's this time. It's really the season to be more empathic. Then, yeah, we could really go over with learning, but at the same time, let's still make well-being a priority for students, because at the end of the semester it's also nice to hear that our students got flat one, our student got very good grade, but at the same time they were able to really successfully manage themselves very strong, mentally healthy, and really come out really happy amidst the first semester of the not normal era. So I think that's how I see it from my that's my take on that, Ma'am May. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rizal. We also have another question here from Jimbert Lingan. Morning. I am not sure if this is relevant, but I just want to ask it anyway. I am almost convinced that I am not learning enough with this new mode of learning and like the face-to-face instruction. I know to myself that I am not good and do not work well with self-study. Video resources in the internet is not just enough. Do you have any advice, ma'am? I am almost convinced.
Okay, Jimbert, I think is the name now. Yeah. Um, what I'm telling you here, Jim, is that you are not alone in the boat. I think about if we have to really do a survey, I think you would have the same sentiment. You would be getting the same sentiment from a large number of students. So not everybody is really very good. Yeah, if you were mentioning not everybody is really gifted with self-paced learning, with video, with online videos and all of these things. But at the present moment, because just like what I've mentioned, we try to really normalize things. But if this is really the best that we could readily do at the moment, then we have to really celebrate the small wins that we have. We could not really expect as teachers, for example, in my end, I'm not really expecting my student to really end 100, to really be learning 100%. From all the learning outcomes that we have at hand, I would not expect that all of them would really be achieved at the end of the semester. These learning outcomes are just seemingly guide and frameworks, but they are not really, I'm not really 100% expecting that everybody could really be learning really extensively from these modules, from this platform that we are having at the moment. What I'm trying to say here, Jim, is that um, at these present times, when circumstances seem very, very difficult, you try to just go over with just, yeah, just learning one part at a time, siguro, that, okay, I cannot be learning everything, but at least I should be learning something from this subject lang. I could not be learning all the different theories of personality, but at least I could make sure that I really have learned at least a theory, one concept from Freud, at least one concept from Carl Jung, at least one concept. Do not pressure yourself then, because everybody is really sharing the same sentiment as you have. So even as teachers, kami gali, when we're also doing other stuff, it's also a prerogative on our end that I don't expect my student to be 100% with me, because even nga in normal face-to-face classes that we have, several students gani are having a hard time really learning. How much more on this end, where we could not really be facing each other, we seldom would see each other, and only during orientation, or we only had to have very, very rare Google Meet. So expectedly that we are not really expectedly that our goals or the learning outcomes has to be realistic also as well. So moto siyang, it's also part of the mind trap that, yeah, we cannot be learning so much, but ang importante here is that at least we could be learning even a little lang, so that that could compensate for the semester that we spend this time. So it's okay if we not could be learning too much. At least we could at least learn something lang from the semester. So that's also the things that I've been teaching my students, and the things that I'm also really imparting to my children as well. Do not pressure yourself to learn everything then. at least lang, make sure that you have that piece that you're master of, that certain lesson in that particular subject that you can say that even if I did not spend too much time on that particular subject, at least I know this one. At least I know this concept. Because the pressure would normally come from us, from the way we look at and view and the way we perceive the subject and our learning from these sense. Okay, I think that would be all, Miss Christine.
Yes, thank you so much, Xyle. So far, no questions anymore. After the, I just would like to remind everyone in Zoom, right after the SSU hymn, SSU March rather, we will have our picture taking. Thank you.
Let us sing a song of gladness to our alma mater race. Come, ye classmates, friends, and comrades, let her glory be your praise. May your lasting light be our guide as we leave our portals wide. SSU only ever, in our hearts will this refrain. Faith will lead us to our destiny of success or adversity. Yet to the name we give our loyalty. Alma mater, hail to thee. In the eye beholds of learning, from the wisdom thou hast gained, shaping lives for home and country, for our nations great and free. Sing we of her fame and honor, carry we her banner high. On and on we march to victory, running both forevermore. SSU, our beloved school, we will cherish your name for aye. With grateful hearts the children love we cry. SSU, Mabuhay.
From our humble beginnings, we began to shine.
Taking little footsteps, we began to climb.
Near or far, we have reached across Samar.
Balogan, Mercedes, Paranas and Pasay. From our halls we walk their aisles.
Achievements and awards now we prize. Join us and we'll show you the greatness of SSU. Samar State University, soaring high with excellence, seat of innovation, we'll build and serve the nation. Samar State University, it's the best for you and me. Your future and dreams come alive. So come on to Samar State University.
Samar State University.